Hello, everyone. Douglas here, and welcome to my classic Doctor Who review. And today I will be reviewing The Keys of Marinus. And this is another story I haven't seen before, and this is my first time watching this. The Keys of Marinus was a replacement script for another script because the other script had too many problems. This story is the second story to be written by Terry Nason, and there are no Daleks in this story. When Terry Nason was writing this, he was intrigued by the idea of the TARDIS crew searching for pieces of a puzzle. Terry Nason and Doctor Who script editor David Whittaker decided to construct the story around a series of mini adventures, each with a different setting and cast. In episode 1, called The Sea of Death, we see an island and we zoom in and we see the TARDIS lands. And inside the TARDIS, we see the first Doctor, played by William Hartnell, Susan, played by Caroline Ford, Ian, played by William Russell, and Barbara, played by Jacqueline Hill. We see some sort of submarine makes its way to the beach. We see some sort of creature is watching the Doctor and his companions. We find out from Barbara that the sea is acid. We see the creature is trying to get inside the TARDIS, but it can't. We find out that the creature we saw is a rubber suit. We see Ian sees the building, and I have got to say, it's fantastic. We see Susan is at the building. We see the person is going to attack Susan, and it falls into a hidden door. We see the Doctor, Ian, and Barbara split up to look for Susan. We see Susan falls into a hidden door, and Ian and Barbara hear Susan scream. We see the Doctor gets into a hidden door. We see the person, and the person grabs Susan, and the person is stabbed. We see Ian disappears, and Barbara is by herself, and she falls into a hidden door. We see Ian discovers the dead person, and he is in the same hallway where Susan was. We see the Doctor, Barbara, and Susan are reunited. We find out from the Doctor that the people in rubber suits are intruders, including themselves. We see Ian saves the person in the white cloak and fights the person in the rubber suit, and the person falls into the sea, and that is Apatin, played by George Kalousis. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. We find out from Apatin that he is a prisoner, and we find out that people in rubber suits are the Vords. We find out from Apatin that he is the only prisoner. We find out that the planet's name is Marinus. And we also find out the machine is the consciousness of Marinus. We see the Vord is spying. We find out that one key is still on Marinus, and the other four were taken. We find out from Apatin that the Doctor and his companions must look for the keys. We see the Doctor and his companions can't get into the TARDIS because there is a force field around it, and Abaton put the force field around the TARDIS, and if they helped, he would give the TARDIS back. We see the Doctor and his companions get travel dials, and Barbara twists the dial, and she's gone. We see the Doctor, Susan, and Ian twist the dial, and they are gone. We see Opperton gets killed by a Vord. We see the Doctor, Susan, and Ian arrive, and they find Barbara's travel dial, and there is blood, and that is the end of episode 1. In episode 2, called The Velvet Web, we see they are inside the palace, and Barbara is still alive. We find out we are in the city of Mofeton. We see a woman comes in and puts stuff on their heads. We see Barbara wakes up and she notices the disc and the alarm goes off and she falls back to sleep. We find out that there is something off with Barbara. We see Altos goes into the room and we see aliens. We find out that Dr. Ian and Susan are in deep hypnosis, and that is such a mind twist. We see Ian is about to kill Barbara, and we see Barbara destroys the equipment and kills the aliens, and she is brutal in this story. And we see Ian is back to normal, and they found the first key. We find out from the doctor that he is going to look for the fourth key. We see Susan hears a noise, and we don't know what it is, and that is the end of episode 2. Episode 2 focuses on Barbara, and that was very interesting. In episode 3, called The Screaming Jungle, we see the noise stops. We see one of the plants starts to move, and no, it's not crinoids. We see Barbara discovers a statue, and she found the second key, and Barbara gets trapped by a statue, and no, it's not a weeping angel. We see the statue rotates, we hear a rumbling noise, and the statue is back. We see Ian is going after Barbara. We see Ian discovers a secret place. We see Ian steps on a floor tile, and we see a suit of armor is about to kill Ian, and Barbara saves him. We find out from Ian the key was a fake. We see the door opens, and Barbara gets trapped in a net, and the ceiling with spikes starts to descend onto Barbara. And we see Ian grabs a pickaxe and it's booby trapped. We see that someone saved her. We hear whispering and we see the plants are getting in and we see a plant grabs Barbara and we find out one of the micro keys is in one of the jars. We see Barbara finds the second key and they operate their travel dial and it's snowing, and that is the end of episode 3. In episode 4, called The Snows of Terror, we see Ian and Barbara have no protection and they are trying to stay alive. And we see a man in a fur coat and he rescues them. And the man that saves him is Vassal, played by Francis D. Wolfe. We find out from Vassal that Alatos, Susan, and Sabitha are in the same area, and he went up the mountains to look for Susan and Sabitha. We see Ian is looking for Alatos, Susan, and Sabitha, and we hear wolves. We see Alatos is knocked out, and his hands are tied, and there is something about Vasher. We see Barbara finds the travel dials and Sabitha's chain. And Ian, what were you thinking about leaving Barbara alone with Vasher? We find out that Vasher put meat in Ian's bag, and oh boy, that ain't good. And that is something you don't want to do in the countryside. We see Susan and Sabitha are alive, and they are trying to make a fire. We see Susan and Sabitha discover knights, and they are frozen. We see Susan and Sabitha are reunited with Ian, Barbara, and Alatos. We see Vaser disables the bridge. We see the third key is in a block of ice, and they discover a pipe, and that will melt the ice. We see the ice is melted, and one of the knights is alive, and all of them are alive. We see the knights come in, and the group is gone. We are in a museum, and we see Ian discovers a dead man, and Ian is knocked out, and we see someone is framing Ian, and that is the end of episode 4. In episode 5, called Sentence of Death, we see Ian regain his consciousness, and he is greeted by an interrogator named Taryn, played by Henley Thomas. We find out that Ian is going to be charged with murder. We see our group is reunited with the Doctor. We find out that the Doctor is going to defend Ian. We find out from the Doctor that he knows who framed Ian and took the key. We find out that Aiden stole the key. We do see a light and Aiden is killed. We see Barbara receives another note and it says there will be another death if you disclose where the key is hidden, and it does prove that someone else is involved. We find out that Susan got kidnapped, and that is the end of episode 5. In episode 6, called The Keys of Marinus, we find out that Aiden's wife, Kayla, was involved, and she has Susan. We see Ian, Barbara, and Sabitha ambushed Kayla and rescue Susan. We see the doctor is hiding to catch the thief, and they caught him. And the thief is the prosecutor, and they got the last key. We see the doctor and his companions go back to Marinus. We are back at Marinus, and we see Alatos, and he is caught by the wards, and they want to know where the last key is at. We see the wards are putting the keys in the machine. We see Ian and Susan see a ward, but it's disguised as Arbiton, and we see Ian give the ward the key. We find out from Ian that he gave the ward the fake key. We see the ward puts the fake key in, and everything is destroyed. We see the doctor says goodbye to Sabitha and Alatos, and we see the TARDIS take off, and we zoom out, and that is the end of the story. I will say this story is a classic, and I will say that this story I will call as one of my favorite First Doctor stories. Episodes 2 and 3 are Doctor Light episodes. I got to say something about episode 2, and holy cow, what a mind twister! And episode 3 is a dark episode. The cast is good. William Russell and Jacqueline Hale give their best performances. Barbara is brutal in this story, and Ian is tough in this story. The script by Terry Nason is great, and the direction by John Gorrie is good, and I would give this story a 10 out of 10. That is my review on the Keys of Marinus. Before we wrap up, I do have an announcement to make. This is my last classic Doctor Who review, but don't worry, there will be more coming out. I will be doing a movie review next, and I will be reviewing Iron Man next, and that will premiere on Easter. So, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and if there is a classic Doctor Who story you want me to review next, leave it in the comments, and I'll see you all next time.